Welcome to Danger Dungeon with the Lanky Paladin. I am your host, the Lanky Paladin, Dungeon Master Chase. This is a channel about all things tabletop role-playing games. Today we're going to be talking about building a one-shot adventure using a 3-act method or a 3-encounter formula. There's lots of ways that you can put together a one-shot adventure. This is just one particular method that I like a lot. I think this video might be particularly helpful if you're a new GM and you're just starting to write your own stories or adventures. It gives you kind of a basic formula that you can use to kind of get an idea of how your evening might play out. Don't worry if your story that you want to tell doesn't fit exactly into this formula. Steal what works, throw out what doesn't, change stuff up on the fly, because that's what we do as Dungeon Masters. I'm also assuming that you're going to be running about a 4-hour game here. If you're running a shorter game than that, you might just consider removing an act altogether or an encounter and making it shorter so that it all fit together in your time frame. If you're running a game longer than 4 hours, you might consider adding an additional encounter, giving individual encounters more room to breathe, or adding more minor encounters. With that being said, let's get into it and start talking about it. If you're going to bake a cake, the first step is making sure you have all the ingredients on hand. It's the same thing here with us building our one-shot. Luckily, 5th edition has a whole philosophy called the 3 pillars, or the 3 aspects of role-playing. They are exploration, role-playing, and combat. Depending on your DM and group style, or just the type of game you want to run, you might lean into one of these 3 pillars more. The important thing is recognizing them and understanding that if you remove one altogether, you might end up with a game that doesn't meet your players' expectations. Sometimes simply saying ahead of time, I'm going to run a game with a lot of negotiation and role-playing, can greatly improve the experience the players have. Perhaps instead of bringing a knuckle-dragging barbarian to that game, they'll bring a sharp-witted bard or wizard. Inversely, the same thing is true. If you let your players know that you're going to be running a dungeon crawl, that might help them pick the best type of player character for them to bring to that game. In storytelling, setting expectations for the type of story you're going to tell is one of the most important things you can do to set yourself up to stick the landing in the end. So our story is going to have 3 major problems or encounters for our players to overcome. These 3 elements are going to form our roadmap to get us towards the end of our game. It won't always be a straight path because we are engaging in cooperative storytelling, but at least we have a little bit of a plan or a little method to our madness. You can do so many things with these three blocks. We could spend so much time talking about how to build a good encounter, and I hope to dive deeper into that in future videos. But for now, just let me give you some quick examples of what these encounters might be. Fighting a group of monsters quickly comes to mind. Perhaps a role-playing encounter where you have to talk to someone to get more information and get to the next step of your adventure. Or perhaps you need to search a desert to find a lost entrance to a cave of wonders. A puzzle could also fall under one of these blocks. Although unless you have a fantastic puzzle, I will warn you, in my experience, players fly through puzzles pretty quick. And if your puzzle takes too long to solve, it might actually frustrate your players. The point is that these encounters should be something major that you think is going to take up about 30 minutes of your adventure. Page 81 of the 5th edition Dungeon Master's Guide goes into more detail about building individual encounters, and I highly recommend checking out that section of the book. Always read the Dungeon Master's Guide, read the books. There's so many answers in there. But before we even get into our 3 acts or our 3 encounters, we're going to need a good call to action, or call to adventure. A good adventure needs a good hook to get the players to care about what they are doing. Sure, you can just throw them into a sandbox and let them explore to their heart's content, but if you want a story with a tight narrative flow, you're going to need a reason to make them want to make it all the way to the end of your story. If you can tie our players' background into the call to action, so much the better. But also, it's sometimes just as easy to say, hey, you see a signpost that the local sheriff is looking for some adventurers to go hunt bandits. Also, you can just use the classic trope that a stranger walks up to you in a bar. Perhaps he's looking for you to clear out a mine so he can get it operating again. The calls to action are endless, and especially fun when the players come up with them. As in, I want to go hunt the wizard that killed my brother. Okay, get in the car. We're going to go wizard hunting. The calls to action also serve to help build up one of our pillars, role-playing. This is the moment when new players first get the light bulb of the possibilities of the game, when you start talking to them as a hooded noble or a gruff dwarf. This is also the moment when players start slipping into the fantasy world you're trying to build. I love the call to action as a GM, because as soon as you start introducing questions, you get the players hungry for more answers. Answers that they can only get by engaging with your game. Exploration can certainly be its own challenge and take up one of your blocks. Perhaps the players have to navigate through a forest or a magical maze to get to the next step. But more often than not, I find that it works well as the glue that holds these acts together. Sometimes the exploration aspect is the players making it through your dungeon, going from room to room, or going from location to location in the city to solve a mystery. Finding new places gives a sense of progress, that you are moving forward and you have new things to see and discover. If you're building a dungeon for a one-shot, I would suggest keeping it around 5 to 10 rooms. While players can often solve puzzles quickly, I've found that the same players love taking their time looking around and asking what's going on in a room, seeing if there's any clues or items that might help them. Here's a hint. Leave clues and items to help the players. It rewards their curiosity and helps flesh out one of our pillars, exploration. If we look at the hero's journey in classic storytelling and books like Hero with a Thousand Faces, the hero's journey is often represented by a circle. At the halfway point, the hero is in hell, or the abyss, or the spirit world. But really all that means is the hero is outside of their comfort zone. And it's there that they find boons or items that transform themselves into becoming true heroes. Somewhere on our journey, we need to give the players something to help them on their way, to reward them for traveling with us through hell. This doesn't have to be a magic item. You don't need to throw a +2 magic sword at the players every game session. Although if it is a one-shot and they're not coming back to these characters, it certainly doesn't hurt to throw some insanely fun magic items at the players. This part can also just be finding knowledge that helps the players reach their goal, or a key that unlocks a door, or a secret that puts all the pieces of your puzzle together. The takeaway is that the challenges we face make us stronger and help us get towards the end of our journey. Often the thing that makes a story interesting is that something we didn't expect happens. Perhaps the dwarf that hired you to go clear the cave actually is working with a cult and sent you to clear the mine so you could be captured and sacrificed to their evil god. Or the bandits that you were sent to kill are really a group of farmers that have been taxed too heavily, and they only attack the city guard because they are trying to free some of their family so they can leave the town for good. In the 3-act structure of movies, the twist often comes right here at the end of Act 2 and the start of Act 3. In role-playing games, you don't have to have this to tell a good story. But if you're going to have a twist, this is a pretty good spot to slide it in. The more you DM, the better you will become at time management. You'll get a feel for your own style. And as you run a system, you'll get more used to the combat mechanics and overall feel of the game and how long certain things will take. If you're trying to fit a game into a time window, you'll need to look at your watch occasionally and start getting a sense if you need to speed the game up or slow it down. Sometimes also your story will call for minor encounters, or you'll just need to add a little something to fill up time before your conclusion. But that doesn't mean that minor encounters aren't important. Sometimes you can just take a whole bunch of minor encounters, put them together, and make that a whole act of your story. Well, Shakespeare might have put his climax right in the middle of his play. In modern storytelling, we want to push the climax towards the end. Having a final showdown or an epic fight is super rewarding in games. Hell, just having a final big bad monster is enough to make people feel like they really overcame something. This is actually something that I didn't care about enough in my early days as a GM. Then I ran into someone running a one-shot and saw how well they did it. It's so rewarding and really does help resolve the adventure. However, getting into a final boss fight really isn't the only way that you can resolve a story in a satisfying manner. Sometimes finding the truth of your investigation, or solving a final puzzle, or having a great role-playing encounter can also be very satisfying. The thing is, there's so many ways that we can end our adventures and tell stories, and finding your own style is really what's important as a GM. I'm going to give you some examples of this method in action in another video, because actually describing those adventures can be pretty drawn out, and I want to keep this video tight and to the point. So if you're interested in more examples of this method in action, be on the lookout for that video. I hope you find this particular method helpful. Like I said, I think it's a great tool for people who are just beginning to write their own adventures to kind of give them a basic structure of how things will go down. If you like content like this, keep an eye on this channel because, like I said, we're going to be creating more videos centered about tabletop role-playing games. Till then, keep those dice rolling. Let's keep on making this stuff up on the fly together.